Good morning, friends. Today we have a very interesting chat by Graham Davey, whose title is A Green Member, Red, Amber, Green, A Political Journey. I will say no more, but...
Thank you very much, Ray. Am I heard satisfactorily?
Yes.
Good.
You are.
Thank you. Well, there are a few broadcasts on radio or television less popular than the party political broadcasts, so I want to try and avoid that and talk more about myself than about the Green Party. That may be even less interesting, I suppose, but my political journey is paralleled by what happens at traffic lights. And we start with red, where you have to stop. And it can be quite a long wait. In my case, it was nearly 30 years. Red, of course, symbolising the Labour Party. I was brought up in a home where voting for any party other than Labour was inconceivable. My father was even more committed to the Labour Party than my mother was, and he was a keen trade unionist and represented the Bristol branch of NALGO, the local government officers union, at national meetings in London. The family took the Daily Herald, which was pro-Labour, of course, and had cartoons by Lowe, where the trade union congress was always represented by a cart horse. And it was a time after 1945 of a Labour government with a substantial overall majority in the Houses of Parliament, led by Clement Attlee. And the country in the middle 1940s was, of course, in a parlous state. We had the whole industry geared to the war effort, production of weapons. We had large numbers of troops, sailors, airmen, coming back from the forces, looking for work. And that Labour government tackled the restoration of normal life in the country by recognising that there had to be massive state intervention. So the programme is largely remembered now for nationalisation of the public utilities, gas, oil, and particularly coal, of course, which we are heavily dependent on. The health service started in 1948. The welfare state, which of course had been worked on since the early 1940s, was then put into effect. There was much more emphasis on council housing rather than a free market in property. So there was a terrific amount to be done, and the Attlee government tackled it with resolution and imagination and really changed the shape of society in this country. There were quite a number of differences between that government and the way it operated and the present one, again with a substantial overall majority. And Attlee was a self-effacing little man, not a great orator, and he didn't present himself as a great leader. The people who mattered were in the cabinet, and Attlee saw himself as primus inter pares, the first among equals. And it was the other cabinet members, leading ministers and secretaries of state, who seemed to get much more prominence. So I remember names today, obviously Aneurin Bevan, Ernest Bevin, Stafford Cripps, Herbert Morrison, Helen Wilkinson, Manny Shivnwell. All these were names which appeared frequently in the press and on radio, whereas the present team, if you can call it that, I don't think will be remembered in years to come. So I was brought up in this atmosphere and voted Labour more or less unthinkingly. I didn't need to think about it. There was no sensible alternative to the Labour Party and its policies in those years. Then at the traffic lights we come to amber, and you may think that amber or yellow is a symbol of me flirting with the Liberal Democrats. No, it's not that. Amber is that period after red when in a car you know you've got to move, because within a tenth of a second the driver behind will be hooting his horn and telling you to get out the way. And the trouble was I didn't know where to go. I knew that I had to leave the Labour Party. There was increasing dissatisfaction with the drift to the right. We had in the late 1970s, early 1980s, Michael Cox was the MP for Bristol South, and he was very much on the right wing of the Labour Party. The attitude of the Labour Party to industrial leaders was one of cozying up to them and supporting them rather than promoting the trade union movement, which gradually went into decline. There was the creation of British nuclear weapons and holding on to them. And the last straw for me was overwhelming Labour support for the Falklands War expedition. There was an emergency debate, I think, on a Saturday morning, unusually. And again, a majority of Labour MPs voted in favour of sending the task force to the Falklands. Now, since 1981, that movement to the right in the Labour Party has continued and is exemplified by Christian Wakeford crossing the floor of the House, a lifelong voting Conservative, being cheered by Labour MPs as he joins them and sits in the Labour benches. So I had to move, I had to leave the Labour Party, and I knew of the existence of the Ecology Party, but I didn't really take it seriously. There was, first of all, the accusation that they were just environmentalists, tree huggers, hippies, beards and sandals. I didn't quite fit that. And there was the strong conviction that a vote for the Ecology Party was a wasted vote. They had, at that stage, pathetic election results. We were 1 or 2%, often beaten by screaming Lord Sutch and the monster raving Rooney Party. So it just seemed stupid to vote ecology. There was consequently a big lack of national and local publicity. In election results, the Ecology Party was simply classed with other. They didn't even bother to give the party its name. because its support for it was so small. And insofar as one looked at the policies put forward by the Ecology Party, they seemed so unrealistic and idealistic. There wasn't the slightest chance with anybody's lifetime of them being put into effect. In the early 1980s, I joined a group called People for Peace, and that was led by Simon Fisher. Now, Simon was a member of Bedminster Meeting and a source of inspiration in People for Peace. I mean, one of the things he initiated and we together put into effect was to create the Argentina Reconciliation Fund, appealing to the public to raise money to send to Argentina for injured Argentina servicemen in the Falklands War, to support the families of those who had been killed in the Falklands War. So I had great respect for Simon. He left Bristol eventually to become director of responding to conflict at Woodbrook, and he gave one of the Swarthmore lectures. But before he left Bristol, he asked me if I knew where he could get an Ecology Party banner before some election. He wanted to put a poster for the Ecology Party in his window. How he thought I had any access to the Ecology Party poster, I don't know. But that started me thinking that here is a man I respect and admire who is voting ecology despite all the objections I had to doing that. So I followed his example and I joined as well. And that led me to read the Ecology Party manifesto, Politics for Life, which I've got here. It's a slim booklet. I think it was produced for the 1983 general election, just 35 pages. And in reading that, I found that all my objections were answered. There is, first of all, the objection that the supporters of the Ecology Party are no more than environmentalists. And you've got on page 4 a very brief summary, it's called In a Nutshell, of what were Ecology Party policies at that time. Starting with peace, through unilateral nuclear disarmament, complete withdrawal from the arms trade, a reduction in international tension through resource conservation, and a secure and credible alternative defence strategy. By those means, peace will be promoted. On work, guaranteeing basic material security, good work for all, based on renewable resources, human-scale technology, and the sustainable economics of self-reliance, recycling, rehabilitation, and repair. This was 1983. On land, it says, with a deep reverence for the earth and for all its creatures, leading to radical land reform, changes in farming practice, and comprehensive measures in control of all forms of pollution. On people and society, the summary is, living in decentralized communities with a proper balance between feminine and masculine values, protected by a Bill of Rights, working nearer home, leading healthier lives and ensuring that our children get a creative, constructive education. On the world, this is the fifth summary, working for one world by helping the third world, stabilizing world population through genuine redistribution of wealth, eliminating our wasteful resource and energy depletion, and protecting the global environment. And the last paragraph, the sixth one, is something I've never seen before or since in any publication of a political party. It's called The Spirit. And the aim of the Ecology Party is responding to people's hunger for meaning, placing less emphasis on material values and more on personal growth and spiritual development, the life and the soul of green politics. Now, those certainly convinced me that the Ecology Party wasn't simply concerned with environmental issues. The next objection I had was a vote for the Ecology Party is a wasted vote. And Politics for Life starts with a quotation from Fritz Schumacher. And he said, "We must do what we conceive to be the right thing and not bother our heads or burden our souls with whether we're going to be successful. Because if we don't do the right thing, we'll be doing the wrong thing, and we'll just be part of the disease and not part of the cure." So that dealt with that objection. And finally, the objection that the policies of the Ecology Party were too idealistic. The Politics for Life pointed out that Greens were getting elected in other countries, in Italy, Belgium, the Netherlands, and notably, of course, in West Germany, where they had 27 Green members of the federal parliament. Now, obviously, where there was proportional representation, there was a much better chance of being elected than the first past the post system in this country. But it was an indication that where people knew and understood what the policies were, a significant proportion of them would support them. Well, the Ecology Party, of course, soon changed its name to the Green Party and became one of 34 Green parties throughout Europe, all with similar values. As I started my membership of the Green Party, I discovered that they do things differently. Soon after I joined, there was a national conference in the Winter Gardens at Weston-super-Mare, and I was familiar with what happened at national party conferences. They were put on essentially for television. So there was a huge set with a prominent podium from which the speaker spoke, and the audience was large and set out in ranks for clapping and cheering and giving standing ovations and all this kind of thing. When I went into the Winter Gardens in Weston to join the Green Party conference, it was startlingly different, because the hall was set out with about 20 tables and chairs round them. And there was a small lectern from which speakers could make their speeches. But the whole layout indicated that the party conference mattered. It wasn't a display for television. It was a place where members could come together and talk in groups about what had been said. And I soon learned that every aspect of Green Party policy came from conference. There was at that time no leader, no clique who could decide what the Green Party policy should be. It had to come from the conference. Often, of course, after a long process of gestation and getting expert advice and so on, but anybody from the grassroots could contribute to that discussion and help to formulate policy. And then, of course, in the conference itself, every session started with attunement. Well, the Quaker members of the Green Party were happy with that, but journalists scurrying around before the session started were often caught by instant silence and had to stand still where they were until the attunement was over. But it was a time, a recognition that it was valuable for an assembly like that to have a short time of quiet, just to settle down and think about what was coming. There has been reluctance within the Green Party to have a leader, and we were divided over that. We had previously had spokespersons, people who developed expertise on particular subjects and could speak to the media on that subject with some authority. But the media didn't want that. They wanted a focal person with charisma whom they could go to every time to ask about the Green Party. And we had a vote throughout the party on that. I voted against having a leader, but we got landed one by a not very large majority. But it wasn't a leader in the sense that other parties have leaders. We stipulated that it was either co-leaders, two co-leaders with gender balance, which is what we've got at the moment, or it was a leader and a deputy leader, again with gender balance, one male, one female. And they're not appointed for life. They have to be either re-elected or changed. I think it's every 2 years. So it's a rather different system from that pertaining in other political parties. The Green Party, when it does get elected, does not have a system of whipping. I've never really understood how this has clung to so strongly in other parties. It has meant, in the case of the group of Green councillors on Bristol City Council, that on one or two issues they have voted three ways. Some for a resolution, some against, and some abstaining. And we're not now accused of being split. It's really a reflection of the fact that intelligent, quite well-informed people of different backgrounds can respond to an issue in different ways. But they're still voting according to their experience and their conscience, and not being told how to vote. Again, you see the effect of whipping in other parties where people are forced to vote against their conscience and troop through the lobbies supporting this tribal instinct. We've got to stay together. You haven't got to stay together. A free vote is worth far more than whipped votes. Within the Green Party, there is the principle, which is applied to society as well, of devolving responsibility to the lowest possible level. So we had a lot of freedom in the local Green Party to decide how we do things and how we campaign. Another thing I liked about the way Green politics worked, it's a rejection of Yahoo politics, and the principle which I think very largely elected Green councillors and MPs stick to is that you talk in positive terms about what the Green Party stands for and the changes it would like, and never attack another politician either by name or by office. Well, I've talked a little bit about the Ecology Party in 1983. Switching now to the Green Party in 2022, there have been some minor changes. One I don't like is that the Green Party has become far more verbose. If you look on the Green Party website for its policies on anything, they're not policies, they're now long-term aims. And it is it's more a reference book than a single document. There are 34 separate policies, each of which is described in the form, if it were printed out, of being a small booklet. So there's a lot of material there, some of which is pure waffle, but it's decreed by conference that this is to be Green Party policy. So that's it. We have got one or two shorter statements of policy called core values, and one of the things I like about Green Party core values is that they reject the idea that human welfare depends on economic growth. Other parties don't seem to have caught on to the fact that living on a planet with finite resources, you cannot go on indefinitely consuming and destroying. Things are going to get bad. And core value number 9 reflects this rejection of the importance of GDP, gross domestic product, and the idea that growth, economic growth, is all important. And it says, the success of a society cannot be measured by narrow economic indicators, but should take account of factors affecting the quality of life for all people, personal freedom, social equity, health, happiness, and human fulfillment. The key thing about policies which I warm to in the Green Party are long-term aims, but they're still there. First of all, renouncing all weapons of mass destruction, unilateral nuclear disarmament, withdrawal from NATO, and a number of other things which I think are pretty radical, yes, but they would go a long way to reducing a major change which I've seen since 1945. The growing inequality in society. Economic activity, which provides all the things we need and in many cases want, depends on land, capital, and labour. Now, labour had much more influence in the 1940s than it does now, and it's land and capital which mark the accumulation of wealth rather than the strength of trade unions. And anybody, of course, who has got money, can easily make more by investment when you're buying property. Now, the Green Party policies, which I think more radically than any other party would tackle that growing inequality, is first of all a universal basic income. Now, people are talking seriously about this now, and there are one or two experiments in trying it out, one in Wales, which will be watched with interest. So that one is not, well, it may be still long term, but it's not quite such long term as some of the others. Another one is abolishing private ownership of land. Is the big landowners are amongst the wealthiest people in our society. And the Green Party idea is a land value tax where all land would be owned by the nation, and you would pay annually for use of that land according to the use that was made of it. Obviously, if you have a house on the land, you're going to have to pay more than the farmer would for producing arable crop or grazing. Associated with that, higher taxes on unearned income. People ought to be more lightly taxed on income they earn by work than income which comes from the accumulation of wealth through the ownership of land or property which they're not actually occupying. Now, what's the time? I did look at 3 areas of policy that I'm interested in. I'll just pick out one. I won't go through them in any detail, but I'll just pick out 1 or 2 things which interested me in just 3 areas of policy. This is 3 out of 34, I remind you. So whatever you're interested in, go to that particular chapter in the list of policies on the website and see what the Green Party has to say about it. The first one in the list, and one I am interested in, is animal rights. And what the Green Party policy is on animal rights is that there should be on every food product which is derived from animals, information about how that animal was raised and killed. There are different ways, of course, of slaughtering animals. That information should be on the packaging. There's calls to phase out factory farming, routine and prophylactic use of antibiotics, which is a major problem in meat production, that we should minimize the transport of live animals and ban all exports of live animals. Again, there is some movement in this direction as well, which is good. Mandatory closed-circuit television in slaughterhouses and a ban on piecework pay in slaughterhouses to make sure that there's no incentive to treat animals in a cruel way in order to speed up the flow through the abattoir. And then there are more sections on fish farming, overfishing, vivisection, zoos and circuses, pets, and a total ban on blood sports and hunting. The whole aim to encourage a transition to a plant-based diet rather than one dependent on animal products. Another area of interest to me is crime and justice, where the Green Party wants much wider use of restorative practice, reparation by criminals so far as possible to their victims, community involvement to show that criminal acts are unacceptable, and detention in prison or other establishments only to protect society or to protect the offender. And during their detention, they should have their dignity and human rights respected, including the right to vote, which they don't have at present. Green Party proposes 2 new ministries, a Department of Crime Prevention, trying to get at the causes of crime and reduce them, and a Department of Justice, which would do the present work of the Department of Justice, setting policy on sentencing. But both of these departments would operate at all levels of government and coordinate the work of relevant departments concerned with social services, housing, education, and so on, all part of crime prevention rather than separate entities in their own right. A lot of emphasis on support for victims of crime, involving the offender if possible. And then there are additional sections on hate crime, domestic abuse, environmental crime, wildlife and animal crimes, motoring and traffic offences, gun crime, and financial fraud. It just goes on and on. Lastly, peace and defence. Green Party policy is that the budget for military forces should be reduced to a minimum adequate to ensure security, but no more so. We have, of course, vastly more in defence forces than is needed for our own national security, where there is no prospective threat. All military forces and exercises should relate to credible threats to us, not swaggering around on the world stage trying to pretend that we're another superpower. Complete condemnation of nuclear weapons. They are irrelevant, totally disproportionate to any threat. Immediate and unconditional nuclear disarmament and the removal of all US bases from this country. Much more emphasis on the territorial army and the integration of civilian volunteers with military personnel. And this would show a less aggressive stance, but remind the military that their job is protecting the civilian population, not military adventures abroad. And secondly, trying to integrate the military more effectively in the values of wider society. And as I've said, any intervention by British military forces abroad should be under the auspices of the United Nations or there's a European group which might authorize military action for some dispute within Europe. The policy makes it clear, of course, that United Nations organization needs to be reformed, and the present arrangement of permanent seats on the Security Council must be abolished, together with the veto. What it suggests instead is that we still have a Security Council with all continents represented according to the size of their population, and all countries taking it in turn to have a place on the Security Council, decisions to be made by a 2/3 majority, or alternatively abolish the Security Council and have all decision making made by the General Assembly, again with a 2/3 majority. And finally, take the United Kingdom out of NATO and end the so-called special relationship with the United States. If you're interested in finding out the 98% of Green Party policy, which I've not touched on, the website, you can Google Green Party UK or go to it's www.policy.greenparty.org.uk. So we're at the last stage of going through, at least I am at the last stage of going through the traffic lights. The light is now green, and I shall continue to move within the Green Party with less and less energy, but without my beliefs having significantly changed. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Graham. That's quite a constructive and enlarged understanding that we now have of party policies. Because I'm here now, one thing which you said about armies and such like, what is the Green Party policy about cadet forces in schools?
Sorry, I didn't hear that, Ray. Can you hear me now? Because I've
Yes, I can hear you.
My headset off, and
No, I can hear you now.
Trying to use the computer, but the volume is low. Just hold on a moment. Right. Could you say that again, please?
Right. On the army issue, does the Green Party have any policies about cadet forces in schools?
It probably does, but I can't remember anything specific. Okay. One of the things is no recruitment below the age of 18, which is a step in the right direction. But the activities of the military in schools and brainwashing young people, usually boys who have little chance of useful employment elsewhere, with the idea of a uniform and discipline and shooting people, and that ought to be stopped, or at least countered with counter arguments. But the military are very persuasive in schools as recruiting areas.
Yeah. I had concerns about the Scouts as well. They're becoming more and more military, it seems to me, and I realise they're teaching other skills, but at the same time, there is a military feel to the whole of the Scouts movement.
Well, there wasn't when I was a Scout leader, but that was 60 years ago.
It has changed. I do realise, not only because my son went through, but our grandchildren are going through. So I'm picking it up there as well.
Yes, okay.
Chris.
Yes, I just wanted to boast that when I lived in Bristol West constituency, when I was a young man, before, not that this affected my vote, but before William Mordegrave took the constituency over, but I voted for the Ecological Party, and I was one of 125 people who were doing that. So
where were you living, Christopher?
I was living on White Ladies Road, on a flat there.
Many of the policies, many of us have been trying to infuse into the Labour Party, but we were losing all the time, many of these policies, to get it embedded into a party that looked like it might get government back one day.
Attendee.
I'm in the Green Party and the Labour Party, and I'm very much more persuaded by the Green Party, really. I did turn up one year to the conference when it was on College Green, and I went with a friend, and we waited in a room for a talk about being new, and nobody came. And sadly, the talk had been cancelled without any publicity, even at the front desk. So that was very disillusioning. And we were pretty ignorant about what it involved and how decisions were made. We just had the little leaflet in our hand. I feel that you have admirably highlighted what the Green Party is about, Graham, in such a short time. You've really covered loads of interesting areas, briefly, very personally, and this was entirely interesting the whole time.
Thank you very, very much. I apologise belatedly for your incompetence in organising your meeting. That sort of thing should not happen. But we're not perfect.
Graham, since I couldn't hear what you apologised for, I'm very happy because I don't think you need to.
Yes, I felt I learned such a lot from listening. I'm afraid I'm a member of the Labour Party, but I think I'm about to take up a form of dual nationality.
You could get thrown out for that, so don't tell anybody.
Okay.
No, I mean, I'm just a member and I've stopped helping in any way whatsoever. I feel it's lost its soul. It's lost the guiding light that we were all working together with, and it's lost democracy. At the last conference, a number of resolutions got through, which were quite radical. And then the powers that be on the national executive have overruled them, and none of them are to be carried out. That's dictatorship. That's not democracy.
No.
Well said, Jenny.
So where do I go?
By the Greens.
Yes.
You're on amber, I think, Jenny. And I've never tried to persuade anybody who is committed to another political party to switch to the Green Party. I've always said, while you're there, argue, fight for what you believe in.
Absolutely.
If it's different from your party's policy.
But you get very tired in old age. That's it's like a wheel. What goes round comes round again. And you think we've been fighting this for years and years and years, and here it is back again.
Mm.
Unfortunately, we have the situation at the moment with the first past the post, which I don't see we're going to get removed anytime soon. And that is of detrimental to the smaller parties of this type of thing.
Mm.
But I'm sometimes, I suppose, a little glad of it, because if we had the kind of other rules which tend that, wouldn't we have some of the very, very right-wing parties have members of parliament also? The ideas of the Nick Griffins and his slimy like getting anywhere near government, I find quite disheartening, friends.
No, I think proportionate representation would work if we only had agreement between various groups. But to try to balance things up, the agreement should be that whoever came second last time to the Tories should then put the candidate up and the others all help. But then you must build a structure behind that the others feel that they still have a say, although that MP is not theirs. And you've got to think about how that's put together. So I think there's some very clever people around. Let's ask them to think this one through. But for goodness sake, block the Tories from ever, they're destroying legislation that we've held dear for years. They're destroying people's lives. The poverty that is about to be inflicted upon communities is horrendous. And nature will also suffer because they don't really believe in green policies.
Any thoughts on those views, Graham?
I think on the whole, we should accept proportional representation. I appreciate there's a danger of right-wing having even greater influence than they do while they are effectively excluded from the political process. But I think that's a risk we have to take. The problem is, of course, it's very much in the interests of the two main parties to stick to first past the post. And until we can generate a change in attitude in probably the Labour Party rather than Conservative, we shall be lumbered with this very unfair system.
Can I come back? The other thing we ought to look at is youth voting, to lower the age, to encourage younger people to think of politics at a very young age and realise how important it is.
Yes, I agree. And I think we ought to be much less frightened about including study of politics in the education curriculum.
I would do something about the House of Lords.
Abolish it, yeah.
But maybe it needs another sounding board of some sort, but somehow elected members on it. You need a brake system in case things go wrong in the main body.
Yes, that's true, but it should be based on election and qualification. The hereditary principle is clearly on its way out, but the way by which prime ministers can use their patronage to pack in supporters is really disreputable.
But I wondered about appointments on a central alternative body instead of the House of Lords from disabled people and other organisations that represent minorities, but should have a say and be able to encourage the major government into taking actions which they may not be aware of are necessary to help smaller groups.
Yes, agree with that.
Shall I become Prime Minister? It's too late now.
I think it needs to be Christopher or me, actually, on account of our LGBT credentials.
Yeah, I'd always said that if I ever was offered it, I'd only go to get rid of the House of Lords.
Okay, friends. Any other questions or comments? Carry on, Hattie.
Well, we haven't heard anything from Rosaline, and I know you've got some views.
I have to say, I've always shied away from politics with a big P. But as you've already indicated, I mean, Graham, thank you so much. I learned an awful lot, particularly about the Green Party, and I'm impressed at almost some of its Quaker-like qualities in its modus operandi. And interestingly, at the last elections, that's who I voted for. But even with my vote, I didn't understand as much about the party as I've learned from you today. So I really, really appreciate how you've presented the case, if you like. And I would certainly continue along the road of supporting them.
Thank you very much, Rosie. Yes, I felt the more I learned about Green Party policies and principles, the more consistent I found them in relation to the Quaker testimonies. It has seen a natural pairing, Quakers and Green Party. That's a very biased point of view, of course. I can well understand. There are very good reasons for voting and supporting the Labour Party, but particularly at the moment, but in the longer term, the Green Party is our best hope, I think.
And I like that. Do what you believe in. From Schumacher.
That was a wonderful quote.
Fantastic.
Well, we are getting shorter and shorter members. So before it comes to the fact that there's only Patsy, me and Graham, I think we should actually stop there, friends. And thank you, Graham. And we will see you all next time, where the lovely Jenny will continue with her interesting life.
Thank you very much, Ray, and thank you, everybody.
Thank you.